Have you ever felt that you are doing everything right, but still something is missing? The routine is up to date, the commitments fulfilled, the smiles posted, but inside there is an uncomfortable silence, as if a part of you was sleeping. Maybe it's because, without realizing it, you were seduced by a world that screams all the time you should want. More likes, more productivity, more achievements. But what about you? Where did we get into this equation? We live surrounded by external voices. Society points out ready-made paths. The family suggests insurance. Culture sells the ideal. But when was the last time you heard your own voice? This internal disconnection does not come suddenly. It infiltrates slowly in the details, in automatic decisions, in "it's okay, they are not," in the "after I see it" that never arrive. And then the emptiness appears, subtle but insistent, as if something was out of place, but you don't know what. Are we living a life that makes sense to us, or just following a script that was written by others? What if the feeling of constant tiredness, the lack of meaning in the days, and relationships that seem too shallow are only symptoms of a deeper problem, the disconnect from yourself? And there is the question that you may be avoiding. Do you really know what you're feeling right now? Maybe it's time to stop looking outside and start listening to what inside you are already trying to talk for a long time. What if everything you need to know was already inside of you? Not in the form of clear phrases or direct instructions, but in subtle sensations, strange dreams, shivers that appear out of nowhere, and that intuition that whispers something even before the mind understands. Carl Jung said that the unconscious speaks to us all the time, but he does not use words. He speaks in symbols, images, emotions, and when we ignore this language, you know what happens? It does not disappear. It accumulates, silent, invisible, turning anxiety without cause, sadness without name, anger without direction. How many times have you felt a weight, not knowing where it comes from? Or did you have a dream that seemed absurd, but left you agitated all day? This is not random. It's the unconscious trying to express itself, and you trying to silence. But why do we do that? Perhaps because they taught us to trust logic more than intuition, reason more than emotion, data more than feelings. But what happens when logic fails, and even then something inside of you remains uneasy? Isn't it time to relearn listening? Listen not only what you think, but what you feel, dream, avoid, represses. Listen without haste, without judgment, with presence. Because the unconscious is like a silent compass, it knows the way even when the mind is lost. And the big question is, are you willing to listen? Have you stopped to think why some emotions seem forbidden? Anger, envy, fear, guilt. From an early age, we learn to hide, disguise, suffocate, as if feeling was wrong, as if the darkness within us was a fault and not part of the way. But what if this darkness was not the villain of history? What if it was an invitation? Carl Jung called shadow everything we repress for fear of not being accepted. They are parts of us that we have learned to hide to fit in the world, but they do not disappear. They just hide and wait. They wait for the moment to manifest, sometimes in explosions, others in painful silences, sometimes in the other that mirrors what we do not want to see in ourselves. But to ignore the shadow is like leaving a child locked in a dark room. It does not disappear. She cries, and then the inevitable question, what have you avoided looking at yourself? The shadow guards our wounds, but also guard our strength, our authenticity, our forgotten power. Integrating it is not becoming someone perfect, it is becoming someone whole. And yes, it is uncomfortable, because it is not easy to face the monsters themselves, but it is liberating, because you realize that they were just waiting to be heard and welcomed. Maybe what you fear most is exactly what you need to embrace. And then, are you ready to turn on the light where else have avoided looking? Prioritizing yourself is essential to heal. Do you put yourself last and call it love? How many times did you silence your truth to avoid conflict? How many times did you say yes with your mouth while the body cried out no? We have learned that giving is virtue. Pleasing is the way of acceptance, but forgetting oneself is not goodness. It is abandonment. And you know the most curious thing is that no one will come to rescue you, because as long as you continue to leave yourself aside, the world will follow the same example. Self-care is not about long baths and scented candles, it's about courage. Courage to say, this does me no good. Courage to get out of where you don't fit anymore. Courage to be honest with what you feel, even if it disappoints expectations. But perhaps the most difficult question is, can you choose yourself, even when it means to be misunderstood? Self-love is not about inflating the ego, it's about honoring who you really are. And healing starts at that point. When you look at yourself in the mirror and decide, I will not abandon myself anymore, because only when you prioritize yourself, you can offer the other something true, and not just what is left of you after nullifying yourself. So tell me, are you willing to be true to yourself, even if it displeases those who only know your edited version? Why is it so difficult to let go, even when we already know that it makes no sense to hold on? We insist on it. It insists on people who were, in dreams that have already changed, in old versions of ourselves that do not serve anymore but still dress by habit, fear, attachment. But growing hurts. And maybe the pain does not come from growth itself, but from resistance to let go of the old. The truth is that everything has a cycle, and when you insist on keeping what you have already finished, you lock the door through which the new wants to enter. How many opportunities have you lost trying to save what was falling apart? How many times did you hold something so hard that ended up hurting yourself with the shards? Detachment is not giving up. It is honoring what was and accepting that you have already fulfilled your role. It is to let go with gratitude what once made sense, but now prevents you from blossoming. And then, the question that echoes, what do you need to give up to finally breathe? It may be a person, a pattern, an ideal that no longer matches your essence today. And yes, it will hurt. But after the pain comes the relief. Space comes, new comes. Because when you let go of what holds you, you finally reconnect with what sets you free. And maybe, just maybe, what you desire most is waiting on the other side of your courage to let go. Have you ever noticed how certain things just happen at the exact moment when you least expect it, or exactly when you need it most? You think of someone and the person sends a message. An idea arises, and soon after, an opportunity appears. Coincidence? Jung called it synchronicity, events apparently without causal connection, but that make deep sense when seen with the gaze of the soul. But does the universe really change, or are you finally aligned with it? Because when you choose yourself, when you start to live in a more authentic way, lighter, more connected with yourself, things flow. Not because life becomes magical, but because you stop swimming against the current of your own destiny. Your energy changes, and the world responds. But attention, there is no point waiting for synchronicity without first doing the alignment, without first cleaning the internal noise, without first being honest about what you really want and not what has been taught to desire. So if the doors are not opening, if everything seems to be locked, maybe the question is not why nothing happens, but yes, are you vibrating in the frequency of what you want to attract? The universe does not listen to your words, it responds to your energy. And when your energy changes, the scenery changes with you. Have you ever tried running with a backpack full of rocks? Maybe not physically, but emotionally, yes. Every hurt you didn't digest, every word you swallowed, Every time you pretended to be fine, when everything in you screamed the opposite, all this weighs, even if you don't see it, even if you say that you have overcome, even if you smile. But the body remembers, the mind repeats, and the soul feels. The emotional baggage does not disappear just because you decided to ignore it. It manifests itself in tiredness without cause, in constant irritation, in the feeling that life is stuck, stagnant, stuck. And the saddest, most people don't even realize they're carrying so much weight. You think life is hard anyway. You think everyone feels exhausted all the time. But what if it's not? What if you're trying to live the present with your hands tied to the past? The question that remains is, what are you carrying that should have already been left on the way? Maybe it's time to open this backpack, look at each stone, name each pain, and decide, with courage, this is no longer useful for me here. Because freedom is not just having wings. It's being light enough to fly, when the masks fall, when expectations dissolve, when the noise of the world silences, what is left? Most people spend their whole lives trying to fit in, trying to be what they are expected to be, trying not to disappoint, not to displease, not to run away from the line. But there is a time when something inside you breaks, or maybe awakens, and then the journey begins. Not the outside, the inside. The journey of becoming who you really are, even if it means breaking with what you've always been, even if it frightens, confuses, or irritates those who have always known you in another way. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole, of bringing together the fragmented parts, of freeing oneself from the invisible bonds of approval, of looking into shadow and light, and welcoming both. But it's a lonely road. There is no map. There is no beaten track. You have to create your own path, step by step. And the question that resonates is, do you have the courage to be who you were born to be, even if it turns you away from those who learn to please? Because being authentic costs money, but not being costs your peace. And in the end, the greatest risk is not to lose yourself from the world, it's to lose yourself. Have you ever stopped to hear the voice that inhabits your mind? The one that whispers or screams that you are not good enough, that others are smarter, more beautiful, more capable, that there is always something wrong with you, that voice that never gets tired of criticizing. What if I told you that this voice is not yours, that it does not represent you, that it is only an echo of the past, a legacy of everything you have been told, of all the expectations, frustrations, and fears that are not yours, but have been passed on to you? The inner critic was not born with you. He was created by people, experiences, and traumas that left marks. He is the reflection of your insecurity, not your truth. And here's the big challenge. Will you continue to believe this critic that diminishes you? Or will you start cultivating a more gentle, compassionate, truer voice? Because you see, all the internal critic does is keep you in the comfort zone of known pain. He prevents you from trying, from daring, from being. He wants to protect you from rejection, failure, shame. But do you know what the price is? The price is never know what you are capable of, never live your deepest potential, never risk being more than the minimum. What if the key to getting rid of all this is just deconstruct that voice? Turn it into an ally, not an enemy. The critic won't disappear all at once, but you can start questioning him, challenging his certainties, replacing your harsh words with words of compassion and encouragement. Because who you are is not what the inner critic says you are. It's what you decide to believe. Have you ever wondered why it sometimes seems like everything around you is out of control? Why do some situations repeat, as if they were drawn in your life? As if you were somehow stuck in a loop, but not knowing how to get out? The answer is not outside, it's inside. Self-knowledge is the map that guides us through the labyrinths of our mind, our heart, our soul. It is the power to look inward and recognize what moves us, what limits us, what makes us suffer, and in doing so, gain the key to transform. When you know yourself deeply, you know exactly where your fears are born, where your insecurities hide. You understand why you repeat certain patterns and why some wounds continue to bleed even when you think you have overcome them. But at the same time, you gain the power to change, to take the reins of your life, to no longer be held hostage by your automatic reactions. How many times have you felt that feeling that something was right or wrong, even without an apparent logical reason? Intuition is like a soft voice, which often gets lost in the noise of reason. But if you learn to listen, it guides you in a surprising way. She doesn't need explanations. She doesn't need evidence. She just knows. And what is even more fascinating is that intuition does not lie. While the rational mind lives in doubts, fears, and what if, intuition speaks with silent clarity. It is like a secret map, which shows you the way even when there are no visible signs. But here's the trick. Do you trust it? Or do you ignore, believing that reason is always more reliable? Most of us learn to doubt our intuition. It is as if the voice that comes from the heart is irrelevant in front of the facts of the mind. But intuition is the wisdom of the unconscious, the part of you that already knows what your mind cannot see. What if I told you that trusting her is, in fact, an act of self-love? That following intuition is aligning with your deepest truth? The question that remains is, are you willing to listen to your intuition, even when it challenges the conventions and logic of the world? Because deep down, she knows what's best for you, and she won't lead you astray. Because by understanding its shadows and its lights, you understand yourself, and by understanding yourself, you become unshakable. Pain is no longer a burden, it becomes a lesson. Fear, an invitation to grow. Insecurity, a starting point for transformation. So I ask you, are you willing to look inside without masks, without excuses, without fear? Because in the end, the greatest power is to know yourself. And by doing that, you transform your life from within. If this video touched you in any way, take a deep breath. Now imagine how many other people need to hear it too. Enjoy this video to reach who is still losing trying to fit. Subscribe to the channel. Here we do not wear masks, we take off. And if you've come this far, I invite you to take the next step. Click on the next video and continue this journey back to yourself. Because sometimes all we need is someone to say, "You're not alone," until the next video.